Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to this special WorkTech webinar in partnership with Brivo. I'm Jeremy Meyerson. I'm Director of WorkTech Academy and your chair for this session. Our theme today is all about creating a digital ecosystem to enhance hybrid working. And our title, Matching Expectations, is carefully chosen because currently there's a mismatch between the demand by employees for a safe, stable, and seamless hybrid work experience and the ability of companies to supply that experience. At WorkTech Academy, we're talking to business and workplace leaders all the time. And what they're telling us is this: they recognize that successful adoption of a hybrid model will require the type of digital integration we've not seen before. But right now, companies are struggling. They're all over the map. So how can we smooth the path to better employee experience through system integration that is safe and secure? And how can organizations find out where they sit on the journey to digital transformation that supports hybrid adoption? This webinar aims to answer those questions. And to help us do that, we've got a great lineup of experts in the field who I will introduce in just a moment. But before I do that, I'd like to remind you that you can interact with this event by making comments in the chat or asking questions via the Q&A. And I'll endeavor to bring your contributions and weave it into the dialogue. You are very much part of this conversation. You can also take part by voting in the interactive polls that we've lined up for you today. So now on to our expert panel. I'd like to welcome Mary Clark, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of the PropTech company Brivo. She's talking to us today from Washington, DC. Lucas Ingala, the founder and CEO of the building security firm Watchmen Security. Lucas is talking to us from an airport lounge in Boston. And Matt Graham, who very well known to WorkTech audiences, is the EMEA lead in real estate technology and innovation at EY. And he's talking to us from his brand new home office in Kent in the UK. It's our first peek at that, Matt. Well, welcome to you all. I'd like to start by asking each of you to maybe kind of describe the challenges that you're hearing from the organizations that you are talking to. You're all trying to sort it out within your own organizations, but you're also consulting with lots of other firms. So you've all got a kind of perspective. So can I start with you, Mary? What are you seeing in terms of how firms are pivoting to hybrid and what they're doing about it in terms of digital integration?
Thanks so much, Jeremy, and thank you so much for the webinar. This is I was just at a conference about 2 weeks ago, and there was a panel, and it was the spectrum to spectrum, end to end of everyone's got to return back to work to, well, we're letting everyone kind of do whatever they want to, and everything in between. And there is just no one answer right now. And it's the challenge with digital transformation has always been, how do you wrap culture around digital transformation and ensure that it has a reasonable place, but it is taking into consideration the general culture that you currently have and the one you aspire to. And so I think if I had to put anything in there is trying to figure out where's our culture now in this very challenging hybrid work environment, and what does that mean? And then what is our digital transformation path that we have to take as we try to figure out how to manage hybrid working? So every company we talk to is truly just on this journey of discovery, and there are a lot of different questions there, certainly as it relates to security all the way around that entire issue. So it's hard. It's a very hard thing.
Yeah.
There's no question.
as you say, some companies are hardly hybrid and some companies are hyper hybrid, and we'll come on to that. But Matt, where's EY in the picture? I mean, you have a massive portfolio of. Do you want to just sketch out?
Yeah, obviously EY being one of the big four, we do have a massive portfolio of offices globally, which means that within our own company, we experience what Mary was talking about, a whole spectrum of adoption of what we initially called flexible working before the pandemic hit, where people would almost organize themselves naturally into office visits and working from home, usually balancing out around a couple of days a week at home, to the pandemic, and now out the back end of the pandemic, starting to see that maybe it's 20 to 25% occupancy in our spaces in general. And this is the challenge that we're starting to experience as part of our ask from our leadership, is how do we encourage naturally reattendance into our buildings in order for collaboration to take effect or to happen. I think people are quite happy for a primary work from home experience if that works for your role. But I think what people are seeing is maybe the innovation side of things has dropped a little bit. Productivity's gone up, and that encouragement and that team building and that reconnection with the brand that you get from being in a dedicated space has dropped off a bit. So that's the challenge that we're experiencing at the moment, finding the best ways to make our spaces compelling for staff to come in, to create that, I don't know, coffee shop convivial atmosphere that people want to experience, and attract people in at the right time, while still being cognizant of our green commitments and minimizing our energy and minimizing our footprint as far as we can as well.
I mean, I think it's interesting you say that productivity's gone up, but culture and creativity in EY, they're the things that everyone says is kind of suffering, and is no point going into the office at 25% occupancy if the wrong people are going to be in there. They're not the people you want to collaborate with. So there is a whole kind of digital piece there, which I know that you're developing. Can I come on to Lucas? I mean, what are your clients telling you in terms of how they are faring? What are occupancy levels like? What are the fears and concerns around hybrid working?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. And again, guys, I'm traveling, so if you hear other people talking, that's because I'm in an airport. I think I echo what Matt's seeing. It's about 20-25% occupancy for our clients, and really the challenge is this whole dichotomy that's going on right now of, okay, we know it hurts culture if we're not together, and it hurts creativity if we're not together. But we had this global pandemic thing that happened, and it kind of forced everybody in this direction where they have to work, remote. And so it's like, okay, well, how do we maintain creativity and culture, and how do we kind of connect all the pieces and make things, make the experience good for our employees, for our customers, for our tenants, and how do we create that experience for them, and still kind of go into this new era that we're coming into? Because the other thing that's not being talked about is there's a whole nother generation that's coming up that's seen mom and dad work from home, or that's been around that, and that may be, depending on your role in the company, that may be just how you function in your workplace moving forward. So these people that we're working with, they're trying to figure out, how do I put the pieces together? And what we've found is, if we can almost use the access control, which is the base, call it the fourth utility, the base building package for entrance and exit to get through, and then integrate that into some HR platform and property technology, and still create that cohesive where they can come in and they can go seamlessly, on their phone. They can get through doors, they can get through passageways, and they can go to the coffee bar, they can go to a workout place, they can go plop down to the hot station, they can collaborate and co-work, and then they can head home and do meetings. How do we mix all this together, maintain that culture, and still be able to, maintain creativity and culture? And technology, especially nowadays, is really at the forefront of all that, of bringing all those different pieces together and creating that experience that people want, that people thrive for at their work, or as a tenant, or as someone that's renting a space. So we're in a unique time, but technology, really what we're seeing is that like I said, it's the access control to the building, the fourth utility, and bringing all those pieces together so that you can have one platform that integrates everything and creates that experience that people need. So you're still getting the office feel, but you're just not there all the time.
I think that's quite an interesting point, because from our experience in WorkTech, we see a lot of digital transformation, room booking systems, order your coffee via your app. But actually, the thing that's often missing is control to the building. You're still having clunky, piece of plastic, or that is very, very clunky, and probably quite dangerous in terms of the more infrequent and fluctuating patterns of occupancy. So I think you raise an interesting point there. I'm going to go to our webinar participants, and Joe, if you could line up the first interactive poll. I'd like to know where the organizations on this call, where you're at in terms of hybrid working. So if you could, it's just a single choice. So we've given you 4 options here: hybrid, 2 to 3 days a week in the office, mandated; a hybrid but no mandate, so it's a kind of free address; fully in the office; or fully remote, which is a growing trend, especially in the US, for fully remote companies. So if everybody could vote, please. I'm afraid, panelists, you can't vote, but everyone please vote. Mary, if you were voting, what would you choose?
Well, I think probably hybrid but no mandate
Right.
is what I'm coming in hearing so much.
Yeah.
But it's so much has to do with the culture and what you're trying to achieve and the role that you have. It's funny, I was making a note, Matt, as you were talking, and I'm just trying to think about all the things you're balancing, right? It's what is your green objectives, right? Where are you on sustainability? How do you make it enticing? Do you want to have them come back so that they can kind of attach to the brand and collaborate? But innovation has somewhat gone down. The threading of the needle that's necessary in order for this to be reasonable, so that you maybe have a little bit more than 25% occupancy. It's very challenging. But I probably would go hybrid but no mandate. I think it's pushing is too hard right now. I think is seeing mixed results, certainly as the report reflects, as you think about a couple of the case studies that are in there.
Yeah. This is a report that we're producing with Brivo, which I'll talk about in a bit. But okay, so wow, pretty well hybrid.
Neck and neck.
Over 80%, split equally between no mandate and mandated. That's an interesting result. Matt, would you have expected that? And where does EY fit into that?
Yeah, so we're same as Mary, a hybrid but with no mandate. I would possibly see a mandate coming in down the line, but maybe a 1 day a week in the office sort of mandate of your choosing. which again puts pressure on the teams that support that, and not having everybody congregating on the Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays as usually happens with these things. But yeah, it's interesting seeing how many are already experiencing mandates on that, and that there are people who are still fully in the office. But I suppose again, some roles need that on-site presence.
Yeah. It's interesting that you think more mandates are coming down the line. Do you think that's because the economic climate is hardening? And I was reading in the New York Times a piece saying, we've done with the free coffee and the pizza. Now it's the threat to your job if you don't come in.
I think there's a psychological disassociation that happens if you are always away from your colleagues and your interaction is purely digital. I do think there is value in, the micro gestures and the pheromones and all of those sorts of things that establish relationships and build those personal connections. So yeah, I do think that we're starting to kind of see a bit of the hangover from that as people become more disassociated from the from the brand, or from what makes their company their company. So I do think there will be a bit of pushback on that. Not much, because again, people will all for every company that mandates X amount of days per week, there will be one who starts marketing themselves as a company that doesn't, and then the war that's the lines that the war on talent will go down. So any mandates that do come in will be light touch and shouldn't be too onerous on employees, I don't think.
I mean, although we're a small select group today, the figure of 80% hybrid mirrors exactly Microsoft Work Trends Index, which had 30% already hybrid and 50% transitioning to hybrid. So, Lucas, those results won't surprise you. What is, from a technology point of view, if people are not mandating people back, what have we got to look out for in terms of tech? You've mentioned access control, which I think is an important.
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny, just a quick comment. Most of the people that work at our company are what I would consider millennials, born in the 80s or later. And we've given people options. And it's funny, a couple people will go home and they'll start working and then they want to come back because the collaboration, the dopamine that's released in the office, hey, let's get together and figure out this problem. And how do we solve this? And to pick up a phone call or send a text, sometimes it's just too slow. And so that generation is very tribal. They do like connecting. They want to do it in a fast pace. They want to have a voice. They want to know a career path. They want to know where they're heading. And kind of where they work, I haven't found that to be as much of an issue as we make it out to be of trying to get people back into the office. We've had a lot of people want to work in the office. So I thought that was interesting, just hearing your comments. To answer your question, Jeremy, on how to kind of bridge the gap there, really, it comes down to a seamless approach. Okay, how do I thread the needle, like Mary was saying, and I'm at a meeting in the morning and I'm at a coffee shop, and then I need to come into the office, and I'm on a Zoom, and then I need to come in, and really I'm doing everything from my phone. I don't know anybody. I mean, everybody is working from their phone. I'm in the airport. Everybody's on their phone right? I mean, everybody. I'm looking around. One guy's on his laptop. He's next to, but he's got his phone out. So that this device, okay, that Apple and Google have made for us, this thing is really the digital key, or the needle that needs to be that interweaving between all technology to make it streamlined. And so that, so if I want to pop in the office or pop over here, it's all right here. If I'm hopping on a meeting, I'm in an airport, I'm on a meeting on my phone. And so we're seeing a lot because Brivo, as a cloud hosted access provider, they have so many API integrations with buildings and commercial real estate and multifamily as well. But they have API partners, and then they have digital keys that you can that are on your phone, right? So you can, you mentioned security. Well, what happens when these buildings aren't as occupied, right? Or it's late at night, and you need to get into a building. So this authentication device that we have here, it's huge when it comes to how do we interact with our daily lives in our work and how we go out and work and make money, but also the streamline effect of opening doors and bringing different disparate technologies together. And it's right here on our phone. There's more power in this phone than took us to NASA when we went, or what took us to the moon when we went to the moon. So it's really, Jeremy, this is the thread, and it's got to be seamless to everybody. It can't be clunky, especially now in today's age. You guys know, I mean, if it's not, it's got to be now. And if it's hanging up and glitchy, it doesn't work. So that's what I think I see is this device playing a big role.
Thank you for that. I think it's very interesting. Instead of seeing hybrid as a binary between the office as a place and the home as a place, the digital thread, if you like, the digital needle is the thing that is kind of weaving it all together. We have a comment from Merrill Klein, who says, we have less of a mandate and more of a guideline for two or 3 days a week. So between no mandate and mandate, there are kind of guardrails and guidelines, aren't there? Which maybe we should have put into the poll. But Merrill, thank you for that. And do put your comments and Q&As on the chat. Mary mentioned a report that Brivo is producing with WorkTech Academy. It's called Integrated Control, Access and Security in the Age of Hybrid Working. And as part of the report, we want to give you a sneak preview today of a framework for organizations to understand where they sit on the journey to digital transformation that will support hybrid adoption. Joe, could I have a couple of slides up? Yeah. Thank you very much. So this is in a nutshell. This is work in progress, but I wanted to share it with you today. This is a framework for hybrid integration, and it describes 4 typologies of organization. The matrix, has 2 axes. One is from low to high in terms of system integration, by which we mean the level of system integration as part of an organization's digital transformation. And hybrid adoption is the level of preparedness for an implementation of hybrid. And we've got, next slide, please. We've got a number of different places on the map. And probably the most familiar is those companies which have high system integration. They've invested a lot in technology and systems, and they're well down on their journey, but they are not adopting hybrid in many cases as a deliberate strategy because they want people back in the office. And these are companies like the big banks like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase, which have described hybrid and remote as an aberration. Big law firms, they want people back in the workplace, and they're investing heavily in digital. And they aim to give their employees a great digital experience, but the payoff is that people must come into the office on a full-time basis. So those are returners, and we, there's a very recognizable group. Next slide, Joe. Now, the other end of the spectrum, the kind of mirror opposite, are companies which have very high hybrid adoption, work anywhere. No mandate, do what you like, plan the day that best suits you, but they've not matched it with high system integration. They've got low system integration. So they've kind of wandered off, if you like, on a journey which has left them exposed. And this is quite problematic because they don't have the digital infrastructure in place to support their choice giving to employees. And there are a number of issues about security around buildings and about finding the right people and getting the right access and so on and so forth. And then next slide, Joe, there are the bystanders, and they could charitably be described as watching and waiting. They're looking at what their peers doing. They're doing a lot of benchmarking and head scratching. Uncharitably, we could describe them as caught in the headlights, because they've neither migrated towards hybrid working, nor have they bought into digital transformation. They're typically, in some cases, mandating people back to the office in an attempt to act as though the pandemic never happened, but without any new technology investment or integration. And then there's the fourth category, which are really, next slide, thanks, is in the sweet spot of combining digital transformation and system integration with adoption of hybrid working. And I would probably put, sparing your blushes, Matt, I would put the big management consulting firms, EY, Deloitte, PwC, and so on. I'd put them in the integrator category. And there are a number of other high-profile companies like Lego and so on, who've had a lot of publicity for their new campus, where they're developing a digital infrastructure to support new ways of working, and they're remodeling their office environment to meet in changing employee needs. And each side of the equation is mirroring the other. So that's the framework, and I'd like to ask Mary, if you could stop slide sharing now, Joe, thanks. In your experience, where are in your conversations with large enterprise firms, where do they sit on this spectrum?
There are a lot of wanderers and a lot of bystanders because of one of the biggest challenges that I think that anyone who is responsible for security, and when I say security, I mean both physical and cybersecurity, as they look to understand how security weaves into this enticement challenge, which really, what you talked about, Matt, and figuring out how to create that seamless experience that Lucas talks about, that frictionless interaction with the space that is supposed to be where someone is working. The bystanders and the wanderers are stuck in this challenge of prioritization. And so perhaps they had a set of solutions that were partially on-premise, partially on the cloud. They were going down a digital transformation route for their multi-site environments, and then the pandemic happened. And so now they have a footprint of leased space that is global and has very different work patterns and behaviors. And so the challenge of being able to prioritize the technology that needs to be put in place in order to have both the experience and the enticement match, but also deliver an appropriate level of security and manage that huge footprint, which is now, our surface of attack has just gone berserk, right? We now have such a huge surface of attack when you consider that there are assets sitting in people's homes, like myself and like Matt and Lucas on the road. And then on top of that, you have the current present physical space that they have. So I see a great deal of a lack of understanding of the prioritization in technology that needs to be put in place, right? So there are some that are looking at hybrid and thinking, okay, I need to have the reservation and tenant experience solution, perhaps. Maybe I need to start with that so I can do hoteling, and maybe I can create a flexible workspace, and maybe I'll figure out, can I actually sublease some of the space that I have to, provide, another revenue income, and because I have this vacant fallow space that's not being utilized. And then on the other side of that, maybe I need to be looking at my property management solutions. To Lucas's point, and our perspective, certainly, you need to start foundationally with, how are you getting into the building? What is the basics of simply getting into the building? And a lot of people are very concerned about tailgating, credential sharing, something that we call in the report inappropriate access, which I simply call propping the door open. I mean, this is what we're facing in terms of new work behaviors. How do you identify typical utilization times and then those anomalies? And are those really anomalies, or are we just seeing different work habits? So I think so much of this is about starting with understanding what is the culture that you're looking to espouse, what are then subsequently the cataloging of the technologies that you currently have in place, and then building that end state and the journey to prioritize to that end state. It's the typical digital transformation maturity model of going and visualizing what does that end result need to look like. And I think so many, certainly I've been in mobile for most of my technology. So I love that most of my technology career, Lucas, I love that you talked about it. And so many, other companies, technology companies are farther ahead on the digital transformation road, but buildings and structures are kind of the last thing to move down this. So, this is a challenging period of time. Most people have been on a digital transformation path for, 5-7 years. This sector is significantly behind.
It's interesting that you say that a lot of the companies are kind of bystanders or wanderers, because they're the companies that aren't collecting the data on which to make evidence-based decision making. And I think one of the things that the big management consultancies have really got into is data analytics. And I just want to ask Matt about this. How are you using data within EY in order to bring the hybrid model together with the kind of digital transformation?
Yeah. So this is the $1 million question at the moment, I think. I look at the two data streams. You've got your traditional utilization data in which access control plays a huge part, giving you physical presence, who is in a building, and potentially who is on a floor if your tailgating isn't overly bad. And then you have your IoT data, which is usually anonymized and tells you how space is being used. And our challenge now, in order to create effective hybrid working environments, is how do we make reasonable assumptions on wedding these two data streams together to provide real actionable insights? Because ultimately, I think an effective hybrid working strategy needs to be cognizant of the spectrum of roles that you have in an organization, the spectrum of experience that you have in an organization, be it experience within a role or experience of a building. Because wherever you are and wherever those two spectrums intersect, you need to tailor a work approach based on that and create a pull into the space that's secure, comforting, and makes people feel confident about their behavior. One of the things, interestingly, off the back of the pandemic that we started experiencing in EY was losing new hires just because of the gap in between sending your hired letter and their first real meaningful interaction with the company was 2 or 3 weeks of them sitting at home without really receiving or feeling part of or feeling sure what their next steps were into the organization. So yeah, the big challenge at the moment is how do we blend all of this information to create an evolving collaborative environment that we can change quickly depending on what works and what doesn't work for each individual use case that we have dotted around the world. And it's incredibly challenging. We're fortunately in a lucky position that we have reams of people who have AI experience and machine learning experience and data analytic experience, where we can start building the connections between established data sets and all of the new types of information that we are receiving from a kind of hybrid smart building infrastructure to start hopefully answering those questions. Because EY is going to be experiencing some big unique challenges of its own in the coming year or so, which we desperately need that information to support. So I do think, going back to the topic of this conversation, having all of your hybrid infrastructure interconnected, having it as a true ecosystem, where your security platform informs your smart locker platform and your visitor management system, and that leads into your reservation platform and also your visual communications and interaction platforms. It's crucial, because this is where you pick up those correlations that you can then interrogate to see whether they're causations or not, and actually form a strategy to make the workplace more compelling and kind of shape that physical infrastructure so it's right-sized and people want to be there.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really comprehensive answer to a tricky question. I think data is very much part of this story. I'm going to go to our second interactive poll. Joe, if you could cue that up for us. And we're asking the question, where does your organization sit on the journey to hybrid integration? So you've got 4 choices that correlate to the 4 typologies I talked about. First is, we're investing in digital systems as part of a returner policy. We're returners. We're watching and waiting, yet to move forward, bystanders. Our hybrid working policy is running ahead of our digital investment, the wanderers, and we're matching our hybrid adoption with digital system integration. Those are the integrators. So if everyone could vote, please. Just while you're voting, I'm going to come to Lucas again. Just some observations on the returners, because it's a perfectly legitimate strategy to deliberately say to people, we want you back in the office, and we're going to invest in office redesign. We're going to do digital integration, and you're going to have a great seamless experience.
Yeah,
it's from the people you're partnering with in your organization. Are you seeing a strong rump of returners?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I get the advantage of seeing kind of both sides. So there's the early adopters, which are thinking ahead, making capital investments. They're starting to put in these, the call box, for instance, more of a digital call box, not just a number key kind of thing. When it comes to attendants that are sitting at desks, we're consulting and helping drive some of this where, you don't need a guard sitting at a desk for one building, but let's say you own a portfolio of buildings that are adjacent to each other within some square mileage. Maybe that one guard could sit there and overlook all those buildings to kind of streamline some things, because they're not as occupied as they're going through and getting these buildings upgraded and kind of getting the technology stack all upgraded. Those are the ones, these buildings aren't full, but they're thinking ahead of how do I appease and make this workforce that's coming on, that's here now, and that's going to be coming on. How do I make that so that they want to come in, and if they want to come in and they want to collaborate and they want to be in person, they want to see each other, then they can. And if they want to work at home, then they can. So kind of that flex. But then I see another side of it where they're waiting and watching, and they're nervous to make those investments now. And there's a chasm, there's kind of a chasm right now where it's like, okay, do I make capital investment into my properties, or do I not? But I think as time moves forward, these real estate professionals that I'm working with that are making those investments now, they're going to be quicker to lease up than the ones that aren't. Right. And we're even seeing that on the multifamily side. If I have an option to live at a space that I'm dealing with a metal key, or I can go live at a space for not really much more money, and I can get everywhere and anywhere with my phone, they're going to lose to those people that are making those investments to get on the phone. So it's interesting. I'm seeing both sides of it.
Thank you. Let's get the second Okay. Wow. So our hybrid working policy is running ahead of our digital investment. That's 44% of our sample. A healthy 16% are returners. Not too many watchers and waiters, and over a quarter describing themselves as integrators, really matching one thing with the other. Very, very interesting. Mary, based on these results, what should, there's a lot of people saying our hybrid working policy is running ahead of our digital investment. So what are the first steps that companies should take to accelerate their digital integration? In broad terms.
One of the things that you've touched on so far is the need to better understand the needs on data and how data can be used to understand what is the end result that you're looking to achieve. And so much of what we've heard from others, even to the panel that I observed 2 weeks ago that I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, is looking at the productivity and understanding what to the extent that there is data associated with productivity pre-COVID, during lockdown, post-COVID, and now trailing off. Everyone threw themselves, as the report reflects, everyone threw themselves into technology solutions as soon as lockdown happened, right? We had to find things to help us work together. People were shipping, monitors places, and, you're getting keyboards all of a sudden delivered to you so that you can work from home. And we're looking at Slack and we're looking at all these technologies, but all of a sudden the brakes have gone on, and there's now, there's real distress on, what have we done to that, that field of attack here in order for, security to be maintained, while at the same time making it so that we can work collaboratively. So I go back to what I've said, which is it's so important to understand what does that end state need to look like given the culture of the company. And I think, the benefits for, say, hybrid working are really understood by the wanderers, right? So if you think about that response in that poll, they're going after hybrid working because they know for some reason that their employees are really engaged with this. But, what are those prioritization technologies that I need to put in place? And so if, getting that insight into how people are using the space when they're there, I think is really probably the place to start. If you are a wanderer and you have let the technology choices lag, but yet you are pursuing hybrid, whether it's, a couple days in the office or it's free, no mandate whatsoever, getting a sense of how that space is being used, and then subsequently determining what are the right tools and engaging with the employees, right? This is so much about engaging the employees in this decision-making. Because let's face it, if you're in I have a 23-year-old son. While he's enamored with the idea of working remotely, I also know that he's not going to feel all that great if he doesn't get to hang out with the people that he works with, right? At the same time, I've been in the career, I've had a long career, so I'm not too sad about going in every, all 5 days. I'm okay going in a couple days a week. So I think it's knowing how you're using the space today, measuring that up against the kind of productivity that you had pre, during, and now, and then prioritizing the technologies that will look to both increase or at least maintain your productivity while at the same time delivering that experience. I think it's driving right to that point. It's got to be the place to start, I think, for those that are in that wanderer community, the 44% that we just saw.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that, Mary. And just to come to you, Matt, about what's the EY position on cybersecurity and building security? I saw it wasn't EY, actually, it's one of your competitors, KPMG, had a CEO pulse, and right at the top was cybersecurity and building security. They were asked what keeps you awake at night, and it's as Mary very aptly described, the bigger field of attack. what steps are you taking around digital security?
Well, yeah, so there's we have very robust policies in place. One of the disadvantages, I suppose, of operating in a partnership framework like the big four management, like the big four, is there's a lot of optionality when it comes to each country. So it's definitely something that keeps our risk teams and our leadership awake, is making sure policies are followed, while still providing a level of optionality in terms of our physical security. But then our cyber security, we're a lot more robust, which obviously we have to be because of the nature of the data that we're regularly handling and processing. And you can tell that every time you boot up your laptop as well, that it's definitely a big part of the corporate policy. I guess the challenge is the advantage that you derive from that, derive from the additional asks that you have of people in an environment like EY. How do we reframe some of the additional steps that we have to take as a positive, by providing people with more frictionless control over their identity management, by ensuring that teams feel secure in space. And I guess there's an additional element as well that we've seen since the pandemic, is the heightened awareness as well of how do we reassure people leveraging our physical access and control systems that they're going into a space that is populated correctly, that isn't overcrowded and that is distributed quite nicely. And those are all things that a well set up security system can give you, and that we see in those locations where we have achieved that.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Let's ask a question of our webinar audience. Can we have poll 3, please, Joe? This is, what is your organization's readiness for addressing security threats? We've got 4 here. So the first is, we have strong senior management buy-in, training and compliance. We've been behind the curve, but we're catching up fast. Our senior management is yet to prioritize security. We are totally unprepared and concerned about hybrid threats. So if you could all vote, please. I think that's be very, very interesting to hear that. Has everybody voted? I'd like to go straight to the result if we could. Has everybody voted? Joe, do you have, right, okay. Well, that's very reassuring. Nearly 2/3 of our sample have got strong senior management buy-in, training and compliance. Next up is, we're catching up fast, and only small amounts are kind of unprepared or unprioritized. Does that surprise you, Lucas, that result?
Yeah, that was really shocking. I got to be honest. That's really cool. That's great. Yeah, there seems to be a little bit of disconnect when I'm talking to just different companies, that from the senior management to really what is security, cybersecurity, and all of it together, and how does it all play together. So that's interesting, but there is a disconnect on some degree when you're talking about cybersecurity as a whole. The partner that we choose to work with a lot is Brivo, and they're on the call, but cybersecurity is huge for them, and any building that we're going into, cybersecurity has to be top notch. But it's not only that, it's the access control system. If someone gets into your building that's not supposed to be there, that's just as much of a threat, because they could get into people's files, they could get into people's computers, they could take USB drives, they could really do a lot of damage. And going to Mary's comment on the data that's actionable, that these people could use if their senior management is thinking about it, it's like, okay, what's an anomaly? did Bill go through the door today at 10:30, or did he go through at 11:30? And then did the camera see somebody else that went through the door with Bill that shouldn't have been there? And then immediately identifying that and being able to take action on it. So, you know, if senior management's taking that approach and they are really engaged in that, those types of tools are how you stay ahead of something bad happening. Right.
Thank you. We'll hold that thought. If you I hope you catch your plane, Lucas, but that's a very, very interesting point. I'm going to go straight to our final poll, and then I'm going to get some closing remarks from our very insightful panelists. So we have our final poll, please. And this is about access control technology. One of my takeaways from this webinar today is I think all of you have articulated access control as a kind of gateway to the full workplace experience. In a way, access control is the thing that unlocks the gate to a kind of ecosystem of kind of digital services, and that's the thing that is often kind of missing. So there are 4 options here, and this is about investments in access control technology. No, we haven't invested, don't see the case. No, not yet, but we intend to invest. Yes, we've invested in biometrics and facial recognition. Yes, we've invested in a cloud-based security system. So if you could just, everybody vote on that. And just while you're voting, I just want to pick up on a couple of really interesting comments. Doug Barry has said of mobile access control credentials, he's pointed out that it helps, especially with automatic doors. It fosters more inclusive access for disabled and others. And remember, we're looking at a more diverse and inclusive workplace. So we haven't talked much about that, but that's really interesting. And Doug Sightsee says executive guardrails help. We were talking about guidelines versus mandates. Executive guardrails help define the why to come into the office, helps tie the intentional purpose of the office as part of organization's culture and profile. I think that's a very good point as well. Can we have the results? Okay, so nearly half this is clearly an audience that are very interested in this subject and have kind of thought about it quite a lot, because you're investing in a cloud-based security system. 47% of you. A fifth of you don't yet see the case, but a third of you intend to invest. So I think that's very, very interesting. So if I could ask just for some just your reflections on our conversation today, and some closing comments, and we'll go around the group. We'll start with Lucas. We'll and then Matt, and then we'll close with Mary.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, as we've spoken today on this topic of digital transformation and interweaving technology and making, you know, kind of thinking forward for our future workforce and making things easier. You know, I think what I would have to say is just the base building access. I'm going to call it the fourth utility. I stole that from somebody else, but it really is the foundation to having that tech stack that you're going to need moving forward in this new transformation that we're experiencing.
Great, thank you, Matt.
Sure. Yeah, I think, you know, going back to what we've been discussing, one of the most startling insights for me at the end of the pandemic was just how much of our workforce was new to EY and possibly had never attended one of our buildings. And I think we have to build our ecosystems with that in mind, because this is the new nature of work, that turnover is high. People are coming into environments that they haven't experienced before, and they want that feeling of security in how they get in, security in how they find the spaces that they need, and security in how they find the people they need to work with. And that's our challenge as we go forward within the kind of prop tech community, is building the ecosystems to support that sense of security.
Yeah, thank you. And Mary.
I'm going to pick up on the term that that Matt just used. I really do think, and the report reflects this, we've got to start with that end experience that is desired for anyone entering the building. And what is that supposed to be? Frictionless, mobile. And then we need to be looking at the data that's available to us, the actionable data that we're, some of which we've never had to even play with before, and we need to figure out how to access and utilize. To then give us the information needed to understand how to use the space that we have. And then finally, the third thing here is really security. And I think Lucas picks up on this really well, which is there's no longer this divide between physical and cyber, right? It's just security. And the challenge is that when you start opening up that field of view and thinking about it in an entirely holistic way, if you think about the experience and you start really pushing at the data, you can build that security environment that's going to really build that enticement, build that comfort, and build that best possible example, I guess, of hybrid work that I think we all want to have. So I think that's sort of where I'm coming out at the end.
Good.
Well, I think that's a really good note on which to end. I remember we had a conversation, Mary, prepping for this, and you said it's not who you're shutting out, it's who you're inviting in, which is a kind of neat way of putting it. And I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody for joining this webinar. It will be available through our platform and our channels. I just want to say a huge thank you to our panel, Mary Clark, the CMO of the PropTech company Brivo, Lucas Ingala, the founder and CEO of Watchmen Security, and Matt Graham, EMEA lead real estate technology and innovation, EY. Thank you all very much for your contributions. I've learned a lot today about this subject, and I feel this is an issue that is going to get more and more attention the more we get to grips with hybrid. So look out for other WorkTech webinars and events, and wherever you are in the world, have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.